Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another episode of Texting. I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
I'm Chow Mein in St. Petersburg.
And I am a repeating guest in London. Steve, hello.
Steve
Hello.
is the host of the Idiots Ejing YouTube channel, so it's very appropriate that he's joining us today because our text for Season 3, Episode 19, that is the next to last episode of this season, this year, it actually is the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. Yeah, Steve's holding up his copy. I've got
This is the
my
classic
copy
copy.
here.
Yeah.
I've got my copy here. And just briefly, what is this text? Well, since I'm the only one of the three of us in a Chinese-speaking nation, I'll give a brief little explanation of the title. It is I Ching, that is change. So that's why it's sometimes translated the book of changes. E, that's fourth tone. It means change. And then Jing is a word that is sometimes translated book, but it also means classic book, classic text, and it means literally text. If you think of like a textile, you've got the warp and the weft, right? The warp goes this way, and the weft is what ties everything together. And Jing, that's first tone, it actually means warp. So why is this the case? The original books in Chinese tradition consisted of these bamboo strips. So you can think of that as the warp. And then they were tied together with strings. That would be the weft, the cross threading. So that's what the original Chinese books were, these little bamboo sticks that were tied together. So it literally is a text in the sense of a textile. And of course, that we've all heard of the Dao De Jing, right? That's the same word, Jing, text, classic, book. So I Ching, the book of changes. That's my little mini lecture for you.
Very nice.
Etymological nerds.
I like that a lot, actually. And because it also, I think, renders the essence, if you like, of what this thing is about, because it looks like a big old thick thing, right? But in fact, the I Ching originally was really just this very, very, what you've just described, not much text at all, because each of the hexagrams has this very small little judgment. So the original text, which is known as the Zhou Yi, I believe, consisted of very little, and the rest of it is really just commentary that has accrued over the millennia.
Yes,
from what I understand.
Well, that's true of a lot of Chinese texts, ancient texts, right? Like the Sun Tzu's Art of War. Like the original text was quite short, and then you've got these generations of commentators who have become part of the tradition, and that's now considered the canonical Art of War text, right? Even though a lot of it is not actually Sun Tzu. So we're dealing with a very old, ancient text. It's provided
and
guidance
that goes
to people.
Even older than text itself, right? Because the idea was that this originally started from using
tortoise shells
and bones, and kind of cracking them and burning them, and making these kind of oracular divinations from something that was even sort of pre-textual to a certain extent.
Pre-literate. Yeah. Today, this is a digression.
Would you say it was would you say that was like a pretextual ejaculation of sorts?
That's exactly what we had in mind, yes. You interrupted my digression, but
sorry.
Anyway. Well,
my contribution so far.
How does the word ejaculation get affixed to pretextual? I mean, I really like it. I like what you've brought in. Anytime someone mentions the word ejaculation, you had me at ejaculation. But
what's not to like?
Well, an ejaculation can be a type of utterance, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, of course, the meaning that I had.
It's often accompanied by an utterance of some sort, whether verbal or nonverbal. But anyway, you digress. I just wanted to point out that earlier today, I attended the Yoruba in Taiwan festival. So we've mentioned, or maybe we haven't actually on texting, but the Yoruba are one of the tribes of Nigeria, and they have a very ancient mythological system which bears a lot of resemblance to the Greek mythological system, right? Like there are parallels you can draw between Yoruba deities and Greek deities. But they also have an ancient divination system called Ifa. So, many cultures have some kind of system like the I Ching. Let me just quickly read what was described today. Ifa typically involves the casting of consecrated palm nuts to answer a question. The babalawo, or priest, then interprets the message of the nuts depending on how they have fallen. So similarly with I Ching, the ancient I Ching, we had bones, we had tortoise shells, and of course the Romans would look at the innards of sacrificial animals, right? The haruspex is the ancient Roman soothsayer. He would look at the liver of a goat or or a calf or whatever to try to understand the present and perhaps predict the future. So every ancient culture had, or almost every ancient culture had, some kind of method for trying to interpret the changes that can occur between present and future.
Yeah. And when you put it like that, and I think even for those people who have yet to come across or use the I Ching, it all sounds a bit woo-woo and a little bit kind of almost rudimentary to a certain extent. But I think for me, what's really fascinating about this is to also think that it's also in some ways incredibly modern, because, our LLM models, right, are essentially used in by lots and lots of people now as kind of modern day oracles. In fact, that's how I use it. We essentially go to them for answers, and that's what people have been doing for in a very functional way with the I Ching for thousands of years, and really sort of sensing that the answer given is a meaningful one, which is, of course, what I find to be the magic behind this. That that it's always right, essentially. It's never given me a bad answer, which maybe just shows, I don't know, how gullible or confirmation bias my mind can be, but or something or other, right? Some sort of mental bias, but it is kind of weird in that way.
Well, there is kind of a leap of faith, right? Like you have to, on some level, believe that whatever the oracle is telling you is meaningful in some way and pertains to your life in some way. I think I mentioned last time that even though I've used the I Ching for many years, I've consulted other oracles too. These days it's mostly the tarot cards, but sometimes I switch back and forth. Sometimes I'll just feel like consulting the I Ching, and then sometimes the tarot cards. And there's I've also used the Osho Zen tarot cards. Those are pretty interesting too. And I want to learn about Ifa and runes. I've never cast the runes, but I think that would be interesting. But for me, I always approach it as a narrative, like the cards or whatever. If I'm casting coins, it's the coins, but and then the textual commentary is a narrative that relates to me in some way, and I have to, as it were, construct the narrative. So it's still me, right? It's still like a mirror. It's not, I'm not like fortune telling. I don't see it that way. I'm not like trying to ask what numbers I should pick to play the lottery, you know. I'm trying to use these texts as mirrors into my own psyche. And yes, I have to assume that what the oracle is telling me is meaningful, but I'm the one who constructs the meaning. So that's how it works for
how
me.
I would imagine it. Without having the experience that either of you have had, that's how I would interpret what you're doing. Is working with narrative, and in that sense, it's very existential, right?
Yeah. I mean, we construct the narrative, but I guess what maybe makes it magical or makes it new in a way, what gives us novel answers as opposed to just, you know, the answers or the lack of answers going around in our own heads in a circular fashion, is that it does sort of provide a kind of a random intervention, right, from the outside. And in a way, it's maybe somewhat similar to therapy. Someone comes and sits in front of me and they talk, and then I say something, and whatever I say is not going to be something, I mean, it might be something in their head, but it's probably going to be something external to that. It's my kind of free association based on their free association, and it's something about that that dialogue that then produces insight or a new narrative path or something like that, right?
Absolutely, it's therapeutic. I mean, this is the ancient psychoanalysis, right? Like before people sat on couches and paid $150 an hour or for a 45-minute session or whatever it is, they consulted these oracles. And so it's really we're really, when we participate in this, I feel like we're tapping into the wisdom of our most ancient ancestors, you know, like we're communicating with them in a direct way, even though we're like in the 21st century. So it's a beautiful thing. Why don't we?
And as we will see in a moment when we do our first, we're going to go for a card, aren't we? Right. It also, I think you'll see, it kind of really invites free association and interpretation, or at least that's how I've kind of been schooled by my guru, Harman Mesker, who's this, I call him my kind of guru, is this sort of Dutch Ching expert who's really guided me in terms of how I use it. And he's quite a purist in that way. He sort of says you just stay with the Zhou Yi, that very the sort of very concise kind of essential judgment and the image and the trigrams, which make up the 2 hexagrams, which I also have behind me here, the 8 trigrams. And the rest of it is actually, it's going back to Freud's kind of core idea for psychoanalysis, which is essentially you freely associate. All you have to do is freely associate and try not to censor yourself and try not to, just go with wherever your mind takes you. And I think I would say that's probably the best way for us to do it in this session as well.
Well, let's jump right in. Let's do it.
Yeah. So we were going to do, so there's different ways of casting these hexagrams, these 6 lines, right, which are made up of 2 different trigrams, and the trigrams represent different elements, different kind of natural elements, because it's all tied in with Taoist philosophy, and the sense of, again, I'm kind of looking to you for some reason, Mark, as the man who's kind of closer to the source of that. It's all about how... yeah, what would you say about that?
Well, I would point out that the lines are binary, right? They're either yang lines, which is a solid line, or they're
Yeah,
yin lines,
yeah.
which
So
would
that's
be the
heaven, for
broken
example.
lines.
So the kind of the two, we could say maybe the ultimate, the two core elements, right, are heaven and earth. And heaven, of course, is the three young lines. So the three kind of lines of potential. I mean, what is young? It's sort of light, potential, strength. I mean, there's lots of associations we can make with that. And then earth is the three. And I think even
Broken
again,
lines.
it's really nice to see the visuals, because for me, whenever I look at earth, I imagine almost like a seed being dropped into into some little pocket of earth there, right? And then it's going to nourish and grow, something like that.
Yeah, well, we're looking. Those who are watching can see the image back there. These are trigrams. That is a series of three lines, and then you put two
Three
trigrams
broken lines.
together, and you have the hexagram, which is six lines. So to start off, we're going to pick one hexagram. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's different ways of getting your hexagrams. And I always used to think that, in fact, so one way is doing it with these. God, I forgot what they call now.
Yarrow stalks.
The yarrow stalks, exactly. And it's that's actually the longest process. I mean, that takes about 20 minutes using these, but and I always thought that was the most ancient. But in fact, as I say, my guru Harmon, who's been studying this for decades, he actually says that in fact the coin method is more ancient than the yarrow stalks. But the most modern method for us lazy moderns, right, is you just have a deck, and then and we're going to just sort of shuffle, and then maybe, I mean, there's different ways of doing it. You could just sort of pick a card. But my idea was that, because this is the 19th episode, is that we, at some point, maybe, Tomek, you could just say, stop. I'll stop shuffling and then start counting 19 cards down. And then that will be the card that we might say, I don't know, is sort of the ruling card for this session. I mean, the other interesting thing is people have this idea that you need to have a question. You need to go to the I Ching with a question. But in fact, you don't really. It's quite possible just to pull a card and then see where that takes you, because that card is probably, the idea being that it's probably going to speak to something, or predict something, or suggest something that will manifest as we continue talking. That would be the idea, right?
Yeah. Well, or the question can be vague. It doesn't have to be like, how will we end episode 19 of season 3? Maybe the question is just general, like S3E19, and then we see where that takes us.
Yeah.
That's our question. S3E19, season 3, episode 19.
Okay, let's
question
do it
mark.
Then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
We should
14,
have some shuffling music playing in the background.
Oh, that was 19. Okay, so let me make sure I've got it the right way. Interesting. Okay, so they have different names depending on who's sort of translated this, but the one we've drawn is hexagram 9, and I'm holding it up to the screen. But for those who are not watching the video, Tomek is going to use his powers of description here to describe the image. Now, this is not the image, the sort of traditional image. This is an interpretation by the artist, but it's all good. Just to say before you start describing that, Tomek, just to give you some sort of markers, this consists of wind above and sky below. So those are the two trigrams. You've got wind and sky, essentially, okay? And you've also got the title. So we'll come to the judgment in a moment, but the title is Small Influences. What is your mind making of the title and the image?
Should I take those separately, I guess?
Yeah.
Or
either.
Okay. Small influences.
Just any free associations around small influences or the image you see in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the image. It's it looks like a series of kind of falling petals in the bottom half, and but they're all radiating with a kind of fiery crust. And influences, I think about writers and musicians who are citing different people who've influenced them, and how we may share that interest as we're all creatives of some sort. The word small influences is interesting because it suggests something kind of tangential. So I like that contrast because, I don't know, generally I think when we talk about an influence, it's significant. So it's kind of a nice juxtaposition to just kind of think about something more subtle there, something more delicate. And then you mentioned wind as well, which, you know, it's a force.
The two main trigrams.
Yeah, and so wind maybe you might not treat wind with the same fear as like pouring out of rain or snow, but it still affects you significantly. Pass the mic.
Well, can you zoom in?
Yeah, I mean,
can you zoom in on the?
That was your question, Mark. I'm interested in where all of that lands for you, because in a way, you actually came up with the idea of like, episode 19 question mark.
Right.
So what does small influences and the image? How do they speak to you there?
Well, I'm more interested in the hexagram. Can you zoom in on that? Like the lines, the two trigrams, the lines 1 through 6 from bottom to top. What are they? I can't see them that well.
You've got what is it? Wind above, right? Which is which one's wind? Yang yang yin, yang yang yin. Yeah, so that's wind.
Okay.
Wind, which is sort of in terms of my little image here, it's sort of paired with thunder. So you've got kind of thunder and wind. So you got wind and then sky, but sky is heaven. We were talking about heaven a moment ago.
Okay.
So heaven is the three. So it's wind over heaven.
Okay. So I often focus on the individual lines more so than the trigrams or even the hexagrams. So I'm looking at a lot of yang energy, right? There's only like one line of yin. So so I don't know, either we're starting out with or we're going to be arriving at a really masculine kind of energy. Maybe because there are three dudes talking about this, or maybe because we're all trying to talk over each other, or we have to be careful not to talk over each other. We need to lay back and have some more yin energy and let things kind of take their own course, go with the flow more so than trying to control and be in charge and, push forward. Just let the conversation flow. Let that yin energy, so beautifully described in the Tao Te Ching. Water is preeminent, as the Greek poet Pindar says, and Lao Tzu would agree, right? Just be like water. Just kind of conform. Your shape will depend on your environment, right? Like you gotta just adjust to your environment, go with the flow, and don't try to control. Maybe that's one of the messages. But I noticed that your translation is quite different from mine. Like this is number 9, right?
Yeah, and it's probably different to the kind of the kind of classic, because the classic is this the Richard Wilhelm translation, which was done sort of at the beginning of the 20th century, and there it is known as the taming power of the small. Taming power of
Okay,
the small. Yeah.
because mine is translated the power of the meek to
Mm,
tame. So there we
interesting.
go.
Yeah.
So we're relating that to small influences. I mean, that I see that connection, right? Like the thing that on the surface seems to be the least influential could actually prove to be the most influential, right? And could be the controlling force. So if we look again at the individual lines, it seems that Yang is in control, but really Yin is running the show despite all appearances.
Yeah, which is often the case, right? I mean, having just read your travelogue Pilgrimizing, which is which has Cadmus and Harmony are the two characters there, right? I'm sort of based on you and your wife. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
fair to say that Yang is often associated with a kind of more masculine energy, and Yin is associated with a more kind of feminine energy. And well, as we know, it's very often the yin that wears the trousers. Let's put it that way. in relationships, I don't know. I don't know if that's the case with you two, with your partners, that the yin element in your setup is I don't know. I don't know who's yin and who's yang there, but often the yin can be the smaller element, or the what is might be seen historically as the kind of so-called weaker sex, right? Actually, I'm not saying anything new. This is a cliche. Is kind of rules.
Right, sure. Well, and that could pertain to any relationship. I'm thinking of the recent episode we did on Don Quixote, right? You've got the on the surface, Don Quixote himself would appear to be the young force, right? Insisting on these adventures, but maybe it's really Sancho who, as a representative of the yin energy, laid back and just, not too active, is really the more dominant force. What do you think about that, Tomek? I'm trying to include you.
Don't worry, I'm enjoying. Yeah, I'm just thinking about my yoga practice a little bit, and how I need to. I've been having like some issues with lower back pain and what I thought was sciatica. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that for the first time in my life, I need to kind of be approaching yoga a bit more gently and not trying to really do each pose to its ultimate, but rather I'm going to get the best effects by being able to just scale down a little bit and only go to about 50% of what I can manage. And that is actually what will ultimately like heal my lower back. So that's
Mm.
my link. And also the word yin yoga is like, is kind of a more slow yoga. It's so, and I love yin yoga. It's really beautiful
Mm.
and meditative, but also super powerful.
That's a
Holding.
thing, yin yoga.
Yeah, it's like when you
Oh.
hold poses for much longer, like 3-4 minutes for one pose. It's just like really deep stretching, and for some people it's more challenging than like a yang practice where you're
Okay.
working hard going through the vinyasas, but it kind of forces you to deal with your thoughts more, right? Some people can kind of just escape thinking when they're doing a really fast flow, but when you're just sitting in one pose and breathing, you kind of have to be more present with what is. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay. Well, what
Yeah, I mean,
guidance does that give us?
once you start on the free association track, there's so much ultimately there, right? Before we came on, we were talking about, I don't know, what is this latest storm? It's Storm Bertha or something like this. I don't know. I don't even know. I'm in the midst of it, right? There's this kind of massive storm, winds up to, I don't know, 50 knots, etc., 60, 70 knots an hour, etc., going on out there in the UK at the moment. And it is interesting, right, that we come up that the first card we draw, well, I draw, because, in this environment, is sky and wind.
Wind, yeah.
Again, almost a sort of a reflection on we're talking about the elements, and it's saying, well, let's just remind ourselves these are the elements in that are present here at the moment. And also, I wonder if, Mark, this ties in also to the Tao in a very powerful way, because my understanding of Taoism, it's not like I'm very learned in that sort of philosophy, but is that in a way it's almost encapsulated by this the taming power of the small, or the taming power of the meek. That as a form of philosophy, it's all about patience, wu wei,
Yes.
non-doing, right?
Right.
Small, very small, like making very, very small steps, not sort of, I mean, it's very Western in that sense, because we're all about, like, barreling on ahead and drilling and fracking and just fucking going for it, whatever that means. And this, and the whole Taoist system, in my understanding, is it's the very opposite of that, right?
Yeah. Well, the Wu Wei philosophy is very much understood to be one of the central takeaways, I guess, from Taoism. Alan Watts talks about that in what's that great book of his, Man, Woman, Nature, Sex, or something like that.
All right, I
I'll have
haven't
to
read that
look up
one.
the I'll have to look up the
Yeah,
title.
is that a good one?
Oh, it's great. Yeah. And he talks about how, like Zen, as we understand it, Japanese Zen actually has its origin in, Chinese Taoism. And he sees these small influences of like Hindu philosophy. If you read like the Vedas, the most ancient Indian text, there's this idea of being coming from non-being, right? Like, which is a notion that the West has struggled with, right? Like, nothing can come from nothing, as Shakespeare says, and as Lucretius said. But in ancient India and ancient China, that paradox is kind of accepted. It's like being can come from non-being. It's like a, opposites. Well, I mean, in the Western tradition, you've got Blake, right? Opposition is true friendship. So there's not like this hard and fast distinction between yang and yin, or positive and negative, right and wrong. Maybe that's
That's
kind
right.
of a
Yeah, yeah.
that's
Because
kind of like
even though
the
it's essentially binary, which again links up this very ancient system with the very new one, right? Because of course all of our computer coding is ones and zeros. The actual Taoist system does seem to be nudging us, as I think maybe all spiritual systems ultimately are, towards a non-dualistic experience,
well,
or
or
an
it's
epistemology, even,
I mean,
right?
as we often say here, it's not either or, but both and. Like,
Yeah.
clearly, there we do live in a binary world, but if we accept that as the only reality, we're missing something. So we have to be able to have, I don't know, what Keats would call negative capability, right? We have to be able to see the binary world, but also know that that's not the only reality. I was just thinking of a book I've got on my shelf I read recently. Now I can't find it, but it's on Taoism and modern physics. Oh, it's called The Tao of Physics, actually. So it's like how, those guys like Heisenberg, and Heisenberg was very interested in Taoism, and so was Niels Bohr, like his own personal crest, or what's that called, coat of arms. It was like a Yang Yin Taoist symbol, or it was based on that, So, like, modern physics has shown us that this ancient Buddhist or, Hindu or Taoist notion of reality is in some ways more accurate than the Western uh, hard and fast distinction of, light and dark separated, and you must identify with the light, never with the dark. Joseph Campbell talks about how that's probably an inheritance of Zoroastrianism, and then it, like, that idea, came to influence Judaism and Christianity and Islam, all the Abrahamic religions. We identify with the light, not the dark, which, in some contexts is good. I think we want to fight for justice, right? But we have to also recognize that on some level, those oppositions break apart, or merge into one another.
Yeah, and we kind of, I feel like there is some pull to, I mean, we need them almost to merge, because I think, right, we get trapped very often in dualistic thinking. I mean, on every level, right? I mean, we've just seen with the latest election, politics is more polarized than ever, and that is not what our planet needs at the moment. Lots of political parties kind of scoring points of each other for being different. There's very little middle ground at the moment. It would seem, right,
it makes us
in any kind of, yeah.
It makes us fanatics. That's one of the least attractive qualities of those Abrahamic religions. I mean, that's why I rejected the Christianity that was shoved down my throat, by my parents and my society and my upbringing. Like, it was just sensory overload. I couldn't accept that. It wasn't real to me. So certainly that's something that it's certainly good to be aware of the unity of opposites on some level, right? But at the same time, from a certain perspective, we do observe this dualistic world, right? Like, it's important to have certain, I don't know, clearly established boundaries, right? Like, if you walk out in front of a truck, you're going to get your ass run over. So there's certain things that about the dualistic world that are important to respect and observe, right? Like, just for your own personal safety. You can say that, oh yes, everything's one and we're all merging, but if you step out in front of that truck, your ass is going to get run over, which, is probably not a good outcome. Tea break.
Yeah, well, I thought, seeing as we're look at this little teapot, isn't it? I don't know, isn't it cute? This is my Sheng pot. This is the one I use to brew up my, raw pu'er in. It seems to do the business. Let me read for you the judgment, right? The Zhou judgment. Also for you to see, Tomek, how without all the commentary, I mean, there's loads of commentary, right? But just the judgment alone, it doesn't really give you very much. So you are forced again into extrapolating from your own psyche, because the judgment just reads, the taming power of the small has success. So it's a kind of, I suppose it's a good augur, right? Dense clouds, no rain from our western region. And that's all it gives you. So again, if you were just freely associating with the taming power of the small has success, dense clouds, no rain from our western region. Again, I almost treat this like a piece of poetry. And I'm like, okay, just what's it saying? What's it saying to me here?
Mm-hmm.
Beyond the literal.
Well, I mean, the wind and the rain, those two trigrams, that happens every time, really. There's always something like that, which just seems so apropos, so appropriate, right? Like you're in the midst of a storm there, and then the two trigrams we pick are wind and rain. Like it couldn't be more to the point than that, or more like appropriate. But that's always my experience. There's always something that just jumps out at me and
But
grabs
didn't
me.
it say that there is no rain?
Yeah, but it's like the flip side of that, like the negative merges into the positive. It's not so much like is or is not, but just the fact that those two
clouds,
elements
okay.
are there.
Rain. I mean, I guess where I go with that in terms of thinking about, joining it, as it were, now to the question of episode 19 is because I sort of, there's so many ways we could kind of illuminate this text or try and talk about it. There's a lot of potential there, which is also why it's got, the 5 yang lines, which I see as kind of potential, which might not actually manifest into anything real or tangible. So there's all this potential of the dense clouds, and it's I guess it's up to us to milk those clouds. Oh, now I'm getting very cross referencing. But going back to what you were saying before, Mark, what we're also trying to do, particularly in a kind of a Taoist spirit, is not try and purposefully milk the clouds. I sent you like GPT. I asked GPT to give me like, maybe you can even put those in the show notes, like 21 like mind-blowing ideas that we might want to try and sort of squeeze into this episode, because there are some amazing ideas around the I Ching. And I guess in a way this is saying, okay, yeah, you've got those 21 ideas, but if you were to actually start thinking, okay, now how can I get in that idea about this or that, and try and push it in, it's not going to flow. It's not going to be a pleasurable experience.
Yeah, too much yang micromanagement, I guess. But just to respond to your question, Tomek, and I think that's a fair point. Isn't it saying that there's no wind and rain, but it's more about the issues involved than like the outcome, right? And I'm thinking of another couple of lines from the Rig Veda, which are, it both is and is not, neither is nor is not. So it's like there's that understood connection between is and is not, yes and no, right and wrong, positive and negative. It's more the issue itself than the outcome, because whatever it is, if it is now, eventually it's not going to be, right? Because
So you're
everything
saying
is
like
flux.
the mention of it. So since
Just the
it's in the
fact,
conversation,
exactly, just the fact that these two trigrams appear, wind and rain, while he's in the midst of a storm, it's like that kind of Jung would call it synchronicity, right? Which
Yeah.
and of course he was a big enthusiast. He consulted the I Ching
And
as
this
well.
happens, can I just say, this happens a lot when
All
you're
the
using the
time.
Ching.
All the
You
time.
know, I did, in fact, there's a video on my channel where I did a reading with a friend of mine, and we sat down in this lovely kind of like forest. And as we sat down, there was like thunder. And I said, "Oh, there's thunder." And then we do the coins, and one of the trigrams is indeed thunder, and
Of
it's
course.
very, very
Yes.
applicable. You know.
Yeah. That happens all the time. Right. And I
Jesus
was just
lives.
before I yeah, that's what it is. Before I forget, I wanted to point out another modern connection. We talked about the binary connection of, computers, ones and zeros, right? Which could be yang and yin, positive and negative. But how many hexagrams are there?
8. Sorry, 64. Yeah.
Exactly. 64. The exact number of chromosomes in the human being. Someone has
Yes.
pointed that out. Like it's actually
Exactly.
a reflection of our own
64 codons in DNA, each representing a
DNA.
specific
Yeah.
genetic instruction, paralleling the idea of also universal archetypes. That was number 5 in the modern oracle's decision as to what, like 21 things, like it's listicle essentially, like 21 things you need to know about the I Ching. Yeah, and I do really love, I'm not a very mathematical creature, but I love the fact, I love the fact that it all sort of breaks down in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're 47 minutes in, something like that, including our false start. So, what do we want
So
to do next?
we're going to go with the flow and move into a more, a sort of a deeper exploration around a kind of a question that we thought might be interesting to explore, right?
Sure. With the coins, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, what's our question, Tomek?
This is going to relate to the deviants, right?
It could.
Something like that. I mean, that's what we were talking about, or
That's
is it
fine.
something I can go anywhere?
Well, I'll let
seeing as we're
Steve take
going with the
control.
flow, I would say, yeah, whatever comes up for you, we'll go with that. Or whatever form of the question comes up. Let's. So this is my little. I'm going to write it in my little book. This is my little Muji book that I use for this. I call it the T and Yi, and basically, sometimes on a daily basis, I will, but particularly if I'm really stuck on something or worrying about something, usually something to do with, sort of romance, hinge, like, why is that woman not responding to my incredibly interesting, message that I've sent her or some other bullshit, right? I then go and I will write down my question and have some tea and throw the coins and generate the hexagram, and kind of muse on that. And I do find that process for me as a therapeutic process sort of settles things. So if I'm kind of kvetching about something, it will kind of settle me. It will sort of say, okay, Usually it just says some variation on patience. Have patience, Steve. That kind of thing. Yeah. So
Okay.
we'll write your question in here.
All right. So my question is, what should we talk about?
What should we talk about? Okay.
Nature, Man, and Woman. That's the Alan Watts book. And maybe that's what we should talk about. Nature, Man, and Woman. That's a great one. Highly recommended.
But isn't the card going to tell us what to talk about? That's the idea, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think all of the lovely thing with this is that, I have so much faith in this thing that I think it's actually going to answer all of the questions that are milling around in our minds at the moment, including the ones we're not even kind of revealing.
Conscious of, yeah.
So just to say, initially we were going to ask the question, like, what is a deviant text? So I'm going to even include that, right? Because I think in a way, what should we talk about? Nature, man, woman. What is a deviant text? I suspect that it's going to kind of give us enough material for all three of those.
Absolutely.
So
It
let's.
will.
Yeah.
Take the leap of faith, Tomek.
I'm there.
So just to talk about coins, right? I mean, people will often buy the kind of sort of facsimile of sort of ancient Chinese coins. I don't know. They're kind of sort of octagonal or something, right? You can buy them online. But the way I like to do it is with kind of quite the smallest coins. So I guess this is the 5p, which would be the equivalent of what, a dime in is this the size of a dime in the States?
Looks like it.
Yeah. And the reason I like 5p's, and what I've done is I've actually I've actually painted one side of it with model glue. You know that not model glue, model paint. You know the stuff.
Isn't that a felony?
Probably. But
tampering with currency.
Seriously, this took me months of research, because first of all I used matte, and then I realized no, you need something with a bit of shine. And this is because when you throw the coins, depending on whether it lands heads or tail, you either generate a yang line or a yin line. But if you've painted it, it's much quicker, because then you just and this kind of relates to the power of the small, because if let's say you throw the coins, or I throw the coins, right? And I get two yangs, which would be,
Heads.
Heads, and a yin. It's a yin line. In other words, that the small, this is how I remember it, right? The one that's the minority, not the majority. I mean, again, it's very anti-Western. Western would be like, oh, well, it's a yang line. If you throw two yangs, then it's going to be a yang line. Whereas, this is more like, no. It's the odd one out. It's the black sheep of the family. That's the one we actually are interested in, right? So if you throw one black, that's actually what you then write down. You'll write the broken yin line. And the other thing worth mentioning is if you throw three heads, three yang lines, then that is a yang line, but it's known as a old yang, which means that it then, or a moving line, which means that it then creates another hexagram with the opposite line. And that's where you get that idea of kind of like present, future, or something else, because then you get two hexagrams, two for the price of one, when you throw these moving lines. So that's how it works. Yeah. I'm just thinking how to do this. Shall I throw the coins? I was thinking, seeing as you asked the question, it would almost make sense for you to throw the coins, right? Do you have three coins that have got a head and a tail, heads and tails on them?
Who are you addressing?
You.
You, Tomek. Yeah.
Yeah, I can find some coins.
Or I'm happy to do it.
Let's use yours. Let's use yours. Yeah.
The other thing, just to make, just to give a shout out for my little ones, is that I am so obsessed with these things that the reason I like using these is that I'm very often walking down the road, and I'll come up with a question. I'm like, oh, I've got to generate a hexagram. And the great thing about very small coins like this is you can just kind of throw it, and you can sort of do it on the move. So, quite often I'm walking down the road, sort of generating the hexagram on the go, because you can then just throw it and you've got it in the sort of the palm of your hand, right?
It's interesting that it's 3 coins. I'm thinking about the divination blocks at the Chinese temples. I mean, just right around the corner is Longshan Temple, Dragon Mountain Temple. It's one of the most famous and most visited Taoist temples in Taipei and in Taiwan. And so, at every shrine, right, like there are many gods and goddesses in this temple, at every shrine there's a table with these divination blocks, right? And one is yes, yang, and one is no, yin, right? So you toss the 2 divination blocks, and however they land gives you your answer. So that, but it's more. This is more of a soothsaying kind of thing, because your answers are yes, no, and ha ha ha. It's a laugh. The god is laughing at you. So with the divination blocks, it's only 2, items that you cast. Whereas when you're casting coins, and I guess yarrow stalks too, it's 3. Is that right? With the yarrow stalks, you always cast 3, or I've never done the yarrow stalks.
No, yeah, with the Yarrow stalks, it's 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 a whole different
Complicated.
kind of ball game. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll stick with the 3 coins.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna throw them 6 times, okay? And I will tell you what. Well, I'll show you what comes up each time. And
you can't adjust your camera to show your hand, can you? Like to show the actual casting?
Not really, but I can sort of. I don't know.
Okay, I was just wondering. No worries.
Well, actually, I probably could. No, I probably could.
Like if you had a laptop camera, you could just kind of lower it a little bit. Yeah, that looks pretty cool.
Like that. There we go. Okay. At least you could sort of then see how it unfolds, right? Particularly if we get something completely amazing, people might be going, "Oh, you've just done this to make it more interesting." All right, so oh shit, now I'm dropped the coin.
It's good that you're wearing trousers.
Yeah. Very often on these calls, not, which is not to say I'm sitting there naked, but I'm usually wearing some sort of, I don't know, legging option. But I am actually wearing like real corduroy trousers.
Just for the occasion, yeah.
Okay, so here we go. First throw. Okay, so there we go. So we've got, as you can see, we've got the single black, which means it's going to be a yin line. So this makes it so much easier, because normally when you've got the heads and the tails thing, you're like adding up the numbers, and then if you get like a 9, it means it's a yang. A 9 or a 7 means it's a yang, and it's and like or 2 and 6 means it's a yin. So this is just super easy. You got your one black coin, which means it's a yin line. No movement. All right.
So you don't need to cast these on a flat surface. You're happy to do it in your hand, yeah?
Yeah, because I can feel that there is plenty of movement there. I mean, there's no way that they are definitely being shook up. Shake
it like a Polaroid picture.
Indeed. There's it's another yin line. I promise you, though, that it had plenty of shaking there, but we're moving towards. I'm always like, oh, what are we going to get now? Because 2 yin lines means we could be moving towards Earth, but it could be something else. What would yang over the 2 yins be? Something different. I can't remember what that is. Okay, here we go. Oh, hello. So that is now 3. So it is a yin line. It is Earth, but it is a moving yin line. So where I'm kind of mapping it out here, I don't know if you can see. What I'll then do is I will then start another trigram here, with the two yin lines, but this time, right, the yin, the third yin line, because we threw three tails, right? It now moves and it becomes, again, it's the changes, right? It's the book of changes. It becomes a yang line, which is let me just remind myself, what is that? That's mountain, isn't it? Right. So earth becomes mountain in that movement. But we've got three more. Okay, here we go. Trying to keep this listenable, right? Okay, we've got a yang line now, which is so we're kind of flipping. We're flipping into yang. Oh, well done. And now yin. Oh, what's this? We could be moving towards fire here or something like that. And finally, another yin. So we've only got one moving line. But let's start with our first hexagram, which is what is that? I think that's thunder. Is it thunder? Yes, it's thunder over earth, right? So if you've got your I Ching, you'll have at the back this little table which gives you, the 8 trigrams on the top and the 8 trigrams on the bottom, and then you work your way across and you find which one. So I've got the same thing in my little booklet here. So we've got what did we say? We had thunder over earth. Ooh, I'm trying to find it, which is, I think, hexagram 16. Thunder
16.
over earth.
Okay. See what my translation says.
Before we even go there, I guess just starting with the trigrams, before we even reveal the hexagram, what is thunder over earth as opposed to, what did we have before? Sky over wind or wind over sky. I mean, what is that? What is that shift? What are those two elements about for you, thunder and earth?
Mark, take
well,
this one.
just looking at the lines, thunder seems counterintuitive since there's only one yang line. But what does that say? Maybe thunder is more yin than, say, lightning.
Yeah, it's weird. Whenever I look at thunder, because I often look at thunder on my little my visual that I have here, the Bagua visual. I often see it as a kind of. I sometimes think about these as kind of like rhythmic patterns. So like thunder is like, doosh, doo, doo. It's like, I almost see, and I sometimes also see thunder as what's that called? One of those things when you're tannoy system or something like that. I don't know, for me visually, particularly here, that's what it reminds me of. It's like somebody speaking and then their voice is kind of
like a megaphone.
Yeah, like a megaphone, something like that. It's kind of throwing. So the yin lines are kind of the sound waves being thrown out from this this yang source, whatever that is, the voice of God or whatever, and then it kind of the reverberations reach our ears, stimulate our eardrums, sort of thing, right?
Okay, I feel better about that now. The earth with all of its yin energy, that makes sense. But how does it relate to us, Tomek? I give you the difficult
how do
question.
Those two trigrams dialogue with each other? I mean, what is thunder and earth? It's a different relationship to sky and wind. Very different relationship.
Dead air. this is how it works, people. You have to give yourself time to reflect. It's not always possible to come out with a snappy answer that works well on a podcast.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to sit with it in silence, and sometimes it takes days. I'll like do a consultation, and then I'll put it away, sleep on it, and then the next day it becomes much clearer. So we may not know what anything means until tomorrow or next week.
Yeah.
And we'll, it's, as you said, it's kind of like reading a poem. And how many times have we read a poem or listened to a song, and then only months later, sometimes even years later, do we have an aha moment and make a connection that we hadn't thought of before? Like, oh, that's
Well,
what it means.
here's my little contribution was just,
Mm.
first of all, thunder is very positive for me, and it's also something that breaks the norm. And if we were coming back to this idea of like deviance,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
something deviant but very positive. And it also kind of speaks to maybe a desire, like a arguably morbid desire, but like if we think about the CEO that just got murdered, so that was like a moment of thunder, but people are responding like positively, many of them, or it's like an eruption that, and again, that's nothing to do with me wishing harm on anyone, but that's a moment of thunder to the social norm, right? And yet it's like considered almost cathartic, or it's something that needed to be said. So
Yes.
It's a disruption. It's like the thunder. Actually, I think in Finnegan's Wake, there are these thunder statements that are made. They represent like disruptions in the text, and then something completely new comes after that. So yeah,
yeah,
I feel that.
and it's
Yeah, I mean,
beautiful.
thunder seems very key to communication, right? I mean, again, it's of all the elements. I mean, all the elements are making noises, but thunder seems as close to something we might almost be able to imagine as like the voice of a deity speaking to us. And earth is, again, this sort of, earth is like the ear, because I was talking about how the symbol of earth with these three broken yin lines is like it's like the actual earth, with a seed dropping down, but even it sometimes reminds me, I guess, of the female genitals, that sort of opening, right? And this idea of a message being sent and then a reception, which seems to talk very in lots of different ways to those three questions. What should we talk about? Nature, man, woman. And what is a deviant text? It's sort of saying it's got something to do between the relationship of thunder and earth at a very core level, before we even look at the title and the image and the all of that.
Well,
Um,
it also connects back to our previous hexagram when I free associate with Fleetwood Mac. Thunder only happens when it's raining.
yeah.
Players only love you when they're playing. Thus spake
What does that line
Stevie
actually
Nicks.
mean? That's such an interesting line because we all know it so well. But again, it can seem like one of those just glib pop star. But the fact that it's come into your mind at this moment, what is your interpretation of that line? What is your kind of more, again, like that deeper, earthy kind of interpretation, as opposed to, oh well, that's just a line in a pop song?
Well, this is from the song Dreams, so it's not like the daytime logic that we're dealing with. It's the nighttime logic of, say, a Finnegan's Wake, right? So the connections are not immediately obvious. We have to get Freudian with it. We have to try to understand like what the dripping umbrella means, to cite one famous image from the interpretation of dreams. Since dreams are often sexual, maybe uh the thunder would be the orgasm, right? And like the raining can be some kind of bodily excretion, whether masculine or feminine. Of course, that's where I'm going to go with it.
Yeah. And thunder, I mean, particularly between men and women, I wonder if thunder is also it's also an encapsulation of just as this a very masculine form of desire, if you think about it. Like thunder, like men and women at some level, right? It's thunder saying to earth, like, first of all, notice me, take interest in me, have sex with me, all of those things. It makes me think of this. I was watching this stand-up comedy special on YouTube a couple of nights ago, and the guy was talking about the rooster gets up every day, and basically he's like, the first thing he basically says is, I'm here, can someone come and fuck me? Who's gonna fuck me? Who's gonna do it? Anyone? I'm just standing here, I'm just asking someone to fuck me. And he's basically saying that's essentially what the rooster is doing. That's his kind of thunderous declamation. And of course, extrapolate from that what us male idiots are very often doing, including perhaps, who knows, in our writing and our art making, etc. There's that sort of evolutionary idea that, it's all just essentially some kind of display, thunderous mating
Peacocking.
display.
Peacocking.
Yeah, peacocking. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And equally, the deviant text is doing that to some extent as well, because it's setting itself apart from the run-of-the-mill, normative texts, if you like, and saying, well, I'm not that, I'm this. Pay attention, right? There's something thunderous about the deviant text.
No, I like
Speaking
it.
of stand-up comedy, it also makes me think about, I was watching a podcast with Louis C.K., who's firmly got a deviant status now in the culture.
Oh yeah.
And but he was just kind of giving a comedy masterclass to Theo Von about like what makes good comedy, and I can't remember the specific categories that he was outlining, but essentially what he was saying is, every effective piece of comedy is like transgressive.
Yes.
And so it's like he was talking about the process of writing jokes, and he would write some jokes that he knew, this will probably get a laugh. So it's like more like his safe material, and then he's got the stuff that is more risque that he really he's kind of afraid to test out on his audience, but which ends up, it's always one of those bits that is one of the gems of his performance. It's always the thing that he is hesitating to reveal. And we can think of the same thing in terms of literature, right? Like the stuff that usually is the most powerful is like, and again, this is very cliche stuff, but is the most vulnerable, is the most daring, most courageous.
Yeah.
So
it's like Portnoy,
that's the good stuff.
Portnoy's complaint.
Exactly.
I don't know. I've been thinking about
that's major
since
for
reading
me.
Pilgrimizing, because it turns out you're a Roth fan. It would seem, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's something about even now today, when you read that book, it's incredible. I mean, imagine what it was like back then. You're like, shit, can you actually write this stuff? Is
for sure.
Like, is he getting? Can he get away with this?
For
right?
sure. I remember exactly where I was when I read those pages in Portnoy's complaint, and having that exact same feeling, and a huge sense of gratitude that this was on page, and so that's like why the deviant text is so crucial and is like supreme. It reigns supreme. Okay,
it does. So let's introduce the name of the hexagram, because just to add it's a bit like adding to the pot, right? Adding to the soup, because we've got it all going. But now we throw in the name of the hexagram, which is you. Translation, please.
It would depend on the tone. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No. So it is thunder above, earth below, translated here in the Wilhelm as enthusiasm.
That's what I have
Enthusiasm.
too.
Yeah.
It's 16, right?
Yeah, 16.
Mine is
So
enthusiasm as well.
what should we talk about? Enthusiasm, nature, man, woman, enthusiasm. What is the deviant text? Enthusiasm. And the judgment is enthusiasm. It furthers one to install helpers. Right? It furthers one to install helpers and to set armies marching. Install helpers and set armies marching. Okay, what is that? What is that about?
That's
Well,
movements.
let's complicate it further. Speaking of movement, and this calls back to an idea we mentioned before. This sign advises you to move like a stream. So there's our going with the flow, always seeking the simplest course and adapting to the most diverse of conditions. Endeavor to act in tune with cosmic harmony, and your own inner nature. There are fixed laws in your personal surroundings by which you have to live, etc. So a lot of, again, that's just another example. Like the actual words we've been discussing, some of them appear in the text that we supposedly arrived at randomly. And by text, I mean the the hexagram, right? Like some of those key words that have been in our conversation appear in the actual verbal commentary on the hexagram. That kind of thing happens all the time. But often with these instances of synchronicity, I wonder, like, is the synchronicity really there, or is it just because I'm tuning in to certain things? Like maybe it's always there all the time, but it just requires attention to notice the synchronistic connections. You know what I mean? Like
Correct. That's correct.
It's always there, but it's just a question of your attention. You're agreeing pretty emphatically.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right, and that I guess is also where you could say the spiritual.
Are you therefore dismissing it, or you're just saying, okay, all right?
No, yeah. I just kind of coming full circle to like how you said that you approached the I Ching in the first place, right? About kind of the mirror, but the mirror. There's the initial way that you outlined how you tend to approach the I Ching with the mirror and the narrative.
You used the John Lennon pronunciation, I Ching. All right.
Yeah, my bad.
It's all right.
I Ching.
It's in the song God. Plastic Ono Band. All right, anyway,
it's a tricky one. I find it very tricky to also use these terms. Like take for example the term yang, right, which I believe the more kind of Chinese translation should be young. But but the problem is if you say that, people think you're saying the word young as as versus old. Whereas, so it's easier to say yang because people understand if you say yin and yang, and it's also more, that's sort of how we use it in English, but that's not really the kind of kosher pronunciation, as it were, right? That it should be yang. But whatever, potatoes.
Here we go.
Yang.
Can you hear that?
Yang.
Yeah, yang. Yeah.
It's second tone, yang.
Young. Yeah, so it's not even young. It's young.
Yeah.
So coming back to enthusiasm, and it furthers one to install helpers and to set armies marching. Okay, let's go back to your question. what should we talk about? Well, it's telling you what to talk about. It's saying we should talk about enthusiasm, and it furthers one to install helpers and set armies marching. What are the helpers about? For me, when I hear helpers, my mind immediately springs to the fact that every text is a kind of a helper, or the I Ching, or any signifier, as it were, is a helper, right? It helps our minds to think, to process. So it certainly furthers one to install helpers. What do you make of that? And set armies marching. I'm not sure what I'm not sure what I get from the set armies marching line.
Mark, I feel like you didn't take the bait earlier when I brought up this assassination in Manhattan. You've been following that story, I guess, a little bit.
I mean, I heard about it, of course.
Okay. So, again, it's like the enthusiasm of that guy is now setting the armies marching of people fighting against the.
Well, yeah. I mean, okay, so that thunderous event was the catalyst for mobilization. I mean, when I think of armies marching, it's like, okay, time to act. Let's get shit done. Let's make something happen. Mm-hmm. So that, the army's marching.
I'm
that's some kind of mobilization.
Is this the insurance
guy? Healthcare CEO. Yeah.
Right. And the person who killed him, because someone was talking about this on a voice note to me, someone who killed him is being sort of, I don't know, almost held up as sort of a kind of a modern Robin Hood or something. There's a question about right.
But he could have been sent by the company because this guy, the CEO, was supposed to testify. Did you hear about that part? He was scheduled to testify in court like in the next day or two. So he could have been sent by the hitman.
That's kind of immaterial. I mean, first of all, contrary to that, they said that they found these different, labeled bullets that you read that, right? That were references.
No, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think several of the bullets referred to a kind of seminal text, which was like an expose on the industry, the insurance industry, and like how they tend to dismiss people's cases. So that's one thing. But I think I say it's immaterial because what's more interesting is just the response from the culture and the fact that this has happened to be like a left-right unifying issue in America. And you, Steve, earlier you were saying, how people are so polarized, but like interestingly, there's been this celebration, this lionization, which you mentioned, has been fairly across the board. And again, I'm not putting in, I mentioned it to my colleague who's like an older gentleman from Minnesota, and his initial reaction again was like to smile and like kind of be jubilant. One photographer put out like a post that has each person's reaction before and after finding out, and it's like all these kind of like neutral faces then turning into big grins.
Yeah. But again, is that not a sign of just how deep the or the gap has become between the haves and the have-nots, right? So if you fall conceptually into one of the haves, and I guess, CEO earning hundreds of thousands, if not more dollars every year for, sitting at a desk and basically making money out of our fear, because that's what insurance is about. It's basically, I'm scared that, so I had this recently with my dog, suddenly my insurance premium going up 50%. Like, I'm scared that something will happen to my dog. So do I now pay this stupid insurance company £1,300, £400 a year just because I'm scared? What if I'm not covered, et cetera, and that's fundamentally surely what it's about, right? Which I feel too. I'm like, well, sure, you're one of the haves, and we're the people who are getting screwed by your greed, essentially,
right?
And your fear mongering and fear making business tactics. So fuck you.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't kill you, but at the same time, if you were kind of caught and maybe tortured a little bit, I probably wouldn't be crying tears.
Right. And one take that I liked from somebody was just kind of saying, all of us are suspects. You know, so it's like, how are you going to find this person who's on the run, considering
Because we all hate those kinds of people.
and we've all suffered. So many people have these horror stories of the insurance company rejecting an attempt to get like a life-saving surgery,
exactly.
you know, when they already have the insurance, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's just a romantic narrative that's in the news right now and like captured my attention. But especially these manhunts, they're so kind of interesting to follow. I remember when the guy who shot Versace was on the run in Miami and hiding in a houseboat. He's a lot. Yeah, I wasn't really on his side at all, so I don't really see him as like this type of Robin Hood character. But yeah, there's as you said, the Robin Hood is the excitement of him trying to get away, and like maybe he's being hidden by different people, and I don't know. Okay, and of course I'm from St. Petersburg, Russian Revolution.
Well, I just keep taking it back to the thunder, the disruption, the unpredictability, because that's one thing about thunder. It shocks us, it surprises us. We're not expecting it. Suddenly it just happens, and then we have to react, and there are these reverberations, and that's part of that flow of the change, the of I Ching. It's like that's what this text, this oracle, helps us navigate the changes that occur. And it's not always like a systematic, I mean, it never is really. These flows are not orderly. The flow of change is like one unpredictable disruption after another, and then we have to try to like put the pieces together. That again makes me think of like Finnegan's Wake, because when these thunder words
I'm
appear,
not following those references, by the way, which is fine. I'm just saying, like, I don't get the illusion. I mean, I know Finnegan's Wake, the title. That's it.
Yeah, well,
it's Joyce, right?
Yeah, and that's his dream text. Speaking of dreams, throughout the text, there are these, I think they're called thunder words or thunder phrases, and it's just like a 3-line long onomatopoeic word or onomatopoetic word, which represents a disruption in the text, and then something completely new happens, and that word can appear anywhere. Sometimes it's like the beginning of a paragraph, sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it's at the end. You just never know when it's gonna occur.
Have so it's almost like
no, I mean, Finnegan's Wake, I think, is it's a really good text to bring in, next to the I Ching, right? Because I think a lot of people, including myself, if I pick it up, I'm just like, well, this is just gibberish. But that's also what a lot of people think the first time they pick up this thing, right? It's like, well, what? Like, enthusiasm and others want to install helpers and set armies marching? That doesn't help me with regard to understanding the relationship between nature, man, and woman, surely, right? I mean, it's just gibberish.
Or the Book of Disquiet, which you characterized as the emo I Ching. Or but
that's not gibberish. I mean, the thing is, Finnegan's Wake, unless you've got the what is it? The
footnotes,
interpretive powers, right? Because you're a Joycean scholar or whatnot. But also, that is the relationship between deviancy and, let's say, the deviant texts and, let's call it, whatever, more mainstream texts. Because very often with deviant culture is that it, like thunder, it kind of shakes something up. I mean, I'm thinking of like punk, right? It shakes something up in a very small niche, a small area, like a small part of the sky. And then it's almost like that then filters through like sort of the earth realm, and little bits and pieces are picked up by the kind of mainstream culture and utilized in more mainstream usages. And that's why you get to see, further on down the line, that very deviant form of expression showing up all over the place, showing up in children's books or something,
Right.
because it's like that thunder, that pure expression of thunder hitting Earth, and Earth seems to be very good at taking it all in and filtering and taking what it needs, the nutrients, and making something grow for everyone.
And then another disruption is required because it's become so mainstream and boring and,
Yeah.
Normative, right? Like
Yeah.
these thunderous disruptions must be ongoing. Like periodically, we need that replenishment. So we need these transgressions, cultural or otherwise, to occur, to, I don't know, to keep us like nourished through time. Like we can't just survive. We can't be fulfilled with just what the earth has to offer us, right? Like we have to look to the thunder. We have to look to the heavens for some kind of thunderous disruption to keep us, I don't know, keep us sharp, keep us interested, keep us vitalized.
Or just aware, right? It's kind of like, it's like the bell that rings in the, I don't know, the Buddhist monastery, that like kind of like wake up. It's like a sort of a wake up call, because Earth is incredible, but we become, it's kind of, you can get very bored with Earth. It's like, oh well, it's just this thing, right? There we go. I'm just here and I'm just walking along, and I'm on it. Whereas thunder sort of says, yes, hello, what are you doing on this earth?
Yeah.
What's that Mary Oliver line? What are you going to do with your one wild and blah 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 life thing, right? That quote. Yeah, you're better at remembering the quotes. I'm sure you know that one.
No,
you're better at coming up. You're better at remembering verbatim impressive quotes than I am, Mark. I've
Come on,
noticed
Steve. Don't be so humble. You're the recitation master.
Yeah, I'm
a
have to look that
recitation
one
master,
up.
but that's from a teleprompter. I can sound very good when I'm looking at a teleprompter.
No, but I just mean like even in therapy together,
whereas
you
I
talked
admire
about
Mark's ability. There's certain people who just manage to have like quotes just like lodged in their head.
Sure, and I admire Mark for that as well. I'm just saying one of the first things I learned about you when we were doing therapy is, your whole mission to memorize poems. So that's like clearly part of your practice.
Yeah, because I wanted to have those lines, and that was probably one of the poems I learnt off by heart, which I now can't even remember the most famous quote from it.
Well, all right. How should we wrap this up? Or are we ready to wrap? We're like an hour and a half in. Is there anything else we need to consider? Oh, I know. I'm going to answer my own question. So we're talking about these different texts, deviant texts that we consult, and some are more opaque than others. Like if we look at ancient times, these texts, these actual written texts, have been consulted for the purposes of divination or oracular guidance throughout history. For example, people use the Aeneid for that, right? Like they wouldn't necessarily cast coins or whatever, but they would just open the Aeneid to a random page, read a passage of Virgil, and then ask themselves, how does this relate to my current situation? And they're doing the same thing. The process is the same. They're seeing the text as a mirror, and trying to construct a narrative out of it that pertains to them personally at that particular point in time. People have done the same, still do the same with the Bible, for example, the Quran, other so-called sacred texts, right? Like you just
and to be fair,
randomly
sorry to
flip it
interrupt
open.
you, but it's like I think we should say mirror plus this asterisk that Steve added earlier, which is that it's like it is this outside stimulus as well,
Sure,
right? So
sure.
it's not strictly a mirror experience.
But a mirror is too, that's not really you. That's an intervention, and it, like, whatever you see in the mirror is still subject to interpretation, right? That's
Sure,
just a
sure.
piece
I
of,
just thought it's like worth considering this, that it is also like
yeah.
going beyond yourself to kind of get that new thought.
Well, but that maybe that's the ultimate self, right? Like the Hindu self is not the individual self. There's that too, right? That's called the jiva, I believe, and then the atman is the
Yeah.
deep self. So
Right.
the mirror can help you see the, not just the individual self, but the deep self too, like the
Sure.
cosmic self or
Sure.
the
Sure.
collective self.
I feel you.
Yeah, I mean that's why these ancient texts are so powerful, because we're connecting like with the ancestral self, in my opinion.
Another couple things to add, which we haven't talked about, but might be nice to add, even though, as we know, with YouTube videos and podcasts, whether anyone is still listening to this, but if you are loyal listener, maybe Tomek's partner. I don't know. Does she listen to the? Does she? Do you?
Our friend, my friend Christy listens.
Yeah.
And,
Hi, Christy.
And a couple other. We've got a guy named Tom at work who's a solid listener.
This is these are the two little nuggets for Christy, right? Christy, well done. You've made it. You've made it through the bramble of our of our thoughts, but
our wittering.
Yeah, but two things to throw in, which I think are interesting, right, is that sometimes traditionally the lower hexagram, the lower trigram, which in this case is what did we say? Earth, is perhaps representative of you or of us. Okay, so we are sitting here in a kind of receptive state, waiting for some message, something from beyond, or from the Yi, or from wherever to speak to us. And then the upper trigram is often considered to be the other, or the question, or right. So there's this sort of dialogue between you and the other, and in this case, thunder, which is what's happening. But the other funny thing, which again I think shows that maybe the the Yi does have a sense of humor, I think it does, is that when I then look, because we had that moving line, right, which actually then transforms the initial hexagram into another hexagram. The second hexagram is in fact thunder, so it keeps the same one, over mountain, because earth changes into mountain. And mountain has more stillness. Mountain is often, I see mountain as having this very meditative. So it's almost like maybe the point we would hope to reach at the end of the episode, where we've kind of gathered all this material together, and now we can kind of view it from this more mountainous Zen perspective. But the funny thing is that when you then look at the hexagram of thunder over mountain, it is, what was the first hexagram we threw? The hexagram 9, the something
number nine.
It was the something of the small, the taming
the power of the
meek
small. To tame, yeah.
The taming power of the small, the taming power of the meek. And the hexagram that comes from that moving line is not the taming power of the small, but it is in fact the preponderance of the small. It's like it's sort of saying, don't forget about the small. Don't forget about that first question. It's still here. The preponderance of the small. And it's not like, I don't know how many hexagrams actually focus on the small, that have the small in their title. That'll be an interesting one to ask the modern oracle, but not a huge number. So I almost feel like the Yi is sort of saying, hey, let's bring it back to where we started from, right? With the taming of the small and the preponderance of the small. It's all about the small. It's not about, which is maybe what this episode is about, right? I don't feel like we've come up with any overarching grand claims here. Like if you were to say, well, what is this episode about? But it's kind of like, it feels like we've hit on like these small little moments of insight, or I don't know. What do you think?
Well, thunder is huge for me. Like I'm going to be thinking about that for days. I think that's a wonderful takeaway from this episode. Like
In what
the
way?
thunderous event. Well, just like we said, the need for replenishment and disruption, unpredictability, chaos almost, right? Chance, the random. And the I Ching itself could be that element of the random that we need as the spice of life, right? Like we need that force or that I don't know, tool to take us out of ourselves. But when it takes us out of ourselves, it reveals to us our deepest self, you know? Like it puts us in touch with that cosmic ancestral self by taking us out of the individual self. Maybe again, if we're using those Hindu terms, I think it's Jiva for the individual self and Atman, the universal cosmic self. So it's like that doesn't happen naturally or predictably. It only happens when there's a kind of disruption, or there's like a German existentialist philosopher, Karl Jaspers, talked about shipwreck, which is obviously a kind of disruption, right? The only time we learn is when we experience some kind of disaster, or doesn't have to be tragic necessarily, but we need something to disrupt the
That's
routine.
right.
I
We
mean,
need a kind of, I would say we need a kind of challenge. And I would also say the reason I'm like just smiling from ear to ear, internally at least, is what you've just said there, I feel is perhaps the most ego-syntonic expression you have voiced in this episode. Because, you know, my other obsession, right, is the Enneagram. And I've always felt in your presence, Mark, a very strong Enneagram 8 quality, that Enneagram 8 essence. And Enneagram 8 is thunder. I think Enneagram 8 is the challenger. That's what 8s do. That's their. In fact, I've just made a video. Shout out for my. Can I do a bit of marketing? I'm very proud of this. I've actually made a video almost completely about 8s. It's
okay.
called God is a Porn Star. This is my latest video on my channel, but it's mainly about Enneagram 8 and the essence of 8, which is very, very much about, it's about, and that's what I see 8s doing. I see 8s, which is why also a lot of people, I think, who write the deviant texts are 8s, because they're not 8s and 4s. I think this is where 8s and 4s really, really see eye to eye, because I think both of us are shit stirrers in our own little way. We like to kind of stir the shit. We like to sort of challenge the norms, pull things apart. I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts on that. There's something, but certainly 4s do it, I think, in a slightly more devious way, and I think you've got a lot of 4 in you as well. But 8s do it in a very direct, like, you know.
Well, I want to just
face.
my little 2 cents is just for me. And this is kind of reductive, but you know, Steve, and I know you're not exactly British, but you're kind of British, at least culturally now. You know, Brits tend to be more self-effacing, and like, you know, you don't want to necessarily puff your feathers the same way, and like, and Americans celebrate themselves, and I like that. But and I don't know, it's just like Mark is really good, and I like this about Mark, but he's really good at you know, being defiant in the face of like insecurity, you know. So we'll end an episode. I mean, sometimes Mark won't feel it's gone that well, but oftentimes it's me who's kind of like, and he's like, it was one of our best episodes. But it kind of requires that to create art. Otherwise, yeah. So
And art requires thunder. Art requires marketing. I mean, the people who play the whole like and subscribe game on YouTube, right? Yeah, you need a certain brazenness. You need a certain listen,
right,
I'm making this fucking stuff. You're getting it for free.
yeah,
So do me a favor and like and subscribe. And I think but that's much more upfront eight because it's also just stating it as it is. Whereas I think fours, which is why I don't play that game on my channel because I'm more of a kind of a four, right? I desperately want you to like and subscribe, but I sort of see that as and it's not a British thing. I think I see that as a more four thing. No, I'm not gonna. Well, certainly I'm not gonna beg, but I'm not even gonna tell you that you should, which I think an eight would be like. Fucking like and subscribe. I'm going to be more well, just be unique, and then you'll find it all so unique, and you'll just feel compelled to, right? That's more the four game.
Well, I do that as a matter of course. I force myself to do it, so it's like maybe I'm not naturally an eight, but I'm like forcing myself to try to be an eight because I do it just because that's the routine, but I also feel like cringy about it, like, ugh, here we go again. So I'm like asking people to subscribe because what I want to say is don't fucking subscribe. I don't care. But of
Yeah.
course, at the same time, it's like, but wait, no, I mean, I do want subscriptions, and I do want likes and downloads, and I want people to buy my books and listen to my music. Of course I do, but there's a part of me that has to make this boundary, or I don't know, insist on this boundary, like. But
Yeah, there's a real
if
push
you
and pull
don't
there.
like it,
Sure. Yeah.
it's not going to stop me from doing what I do. Just know
Yeah.
that, okay? Of course,
Yeah.
I want you to like it, but if you don't, then fuck you. I don't care. Even
Yeah,
though I
that's
do
the
care,
whole
why
yang
don't
and
you
yin.
like
The
me?
yang, yeah, exactly. The yang is like get it out there, but the yin is this more withdrawn place. And I think traditionally fours are usually more kind of withdrawn types. We're sort of like don't talk to me. Whereas, but yeah. Hmm.
That is my natural state, I would say. Like I'm playing a role, so maybe like I'm naturally a four, but like my social mask is that of an eight. What can I say?
Hmm.
I contain multitudes.
yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that I think of in terms of the preponderance of the small and deviancy and all of that, that line, very few people, I don't know, saw the Velvet Underground live, but those people who did all went and formed bands, and now, that's the music culture we have, right? And I think that's also something that's interesting and worthwhile to think about deviancy, that it sort of has a what's the word? It's sort of what's the phrase I'm looking for? It kind of its effects are greater than its actual
It has like
expression.
ripples.
Yeah, which is what us as content creators, we're all in a way also trying to hold on to, right? Because we all know, particularly in this realm where there's just too much content, nobody really has the time even to listen to the good stuff, let alone this. No. But but we all know that, okay, well, maybe this is the sort of slightly deviant thing. And we also know that when we've caught some little deviant expression here or there, that has alighted in our ears as the good stuff, and it has been meaningful, dependent on the synchronicity of what we're hearing and how it arrives.
Yeah, I like the notion of ripples.
Mm-hmm.
My stomach has ripples.
It's rippling now.
Is it rippling for more
It's
chocolate?
It's just starting to develop. It's starting to develop ripples as I get older.
Well, that's sometimes just known as middle-age spread.
Thank you.
Welcome to the beginnings of what we might call middle-age. So call them middle-age spread. Yeah, yeah. How is your stomach doing? Because the last time we had
It's
any
fine. Yeah, it's
communication, you
fine.
were having something shoved up your backside to investigate your stomach, right? Are you all good there?
No. I did the down the mouth.
Oh, that was down the mouth. I thought it
Yeah,
was up
yeah.
there, up the ass. Okay.
No. Yeah. No,
I wonder
everything's
what
good right
worked.
now.
Well, if you were given a choice, like, would you like us to look at your, would you like us to go up your ass with something or down? What's worse, do you think? Surely down the mouth is harder, right?
I mean, I had the anesthetic, so
Oh, okay.
I paid that extra for the just you wake up and
Oh, you were out completely?
yeah.
Yeah.
The previous time I did it, which was in Moscow about 5 years ago, I didn't, and it was awful.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be awake for that.
Yeah, but
Well,
now
I'd just like to point out that there are other orifices that could be penetrated
available.
by technology.
That's true. You could go up your nose. I mean, all of that. All of that. I know at some point it's all waiting for me, right? Because as you grow older, it just becomes more invasive. But thankfully, technology is getting smaller and smaller. So hopefully, one day they'll be able to go up your ass, into your nose, down your throat, and you won't even feel it. You could be having a latte at the same time. I don't know. That's what I'm hoping and praying for, essentially.
All right, I think we're going off the rails here, which is good. But maybe it's time to wrap.
That's a
How do we
sign.
feel about
All
that?
right. Absolutely.
All good, yeah.
Okay, well, this has been season 3, episode 19. Like, share, subscribe, and all the rest.
And Steve, we would love if you continue to come on. I'm gonna summon you for a future text, which maybe is more something I'm more familiar with, maybe, or So stay alert and please come back.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm kind of getting into this. It's enjoyable. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, and Steve and I will be talking about my book, Pilgrimizing, on another channel, probably the Books Are Burning
Well, that's going to be
podcast.
on, hopefully, if I don't piss you off with my questions. Hopefully that's going to be, you'll let me have that on my Ching channel.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's funny that we've had Thunder and Deviancy and all of this coming up, right? Because we are heading in, which of course excites me as a 4 because I love that territory, and I'm sure of you as an 4/8 combo 2, right? Heading in at this point into a discussion about Israel, right? Is it's like, ooh, okay. So, but that again, that's what's hopefully going to make it an interesting conversation. Where to actually talk about Israel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm excited to watch.
As experienced by me, 10 years ago, which is when I was there. But yeah, it's interesting because there are multiple times of reference, I guess you could say. So there's kind of like the changes that we've been talking about through time, right? Like there's the actual time I visited, then there's the time I went back and looked at my notes and started writing, then there's the time I actually finished the book. So it's like we're looking at different points in time at which I engaged with the topic at hand, which is not just modern day Israel, but the so-called Holy Land throughout history, and my focus, of course, is quite unique in that I see myself as the heir to the Phoenician tradition, right? The original. You want to talk about whose homeland it is? It's mine. I represent the Phoenicians. So if anyone has a claim to that place, it's me.
Oh shit. You said it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think again that is the Enneagram 8 position that is This is a very cool text, right? Facets of Unity, A.H. Almaz, because he says that the essence of 8 is, he calls it holy truth. And holy truth is not just the truth telling, not just the thunderous declamations, which are all true, but it's sort of this, again, this non-dualistic, like, everything is related, everything, we don't need to go polarized here, because it's all encapsulated. So there is no deviation between God and a porn star, which is, the main hypothesis of my God is a porn star video. Once you sort of start to see it through, once you read the Old Testament and watch a few interviews with Valentina Nappi, who's the main, Enneagram 8 porn star that I focus on in the video, you're away. It's all just the truth just all comes together. So, yeah.
Well, I'll just, as a caveat, I will say that my views are constantly evolving, and like, this is almost outdated now, right? Like, the foreword was written October 7th, 2023, and here we are at the end of 2024, and so
That's
many
right.
things have happened since then.
And that's why I'm looking forward to our conversation, because you don't really go into, I don't really know, having read that, right, what Mark Will thinks about the current situation I can guess, in Israel, and understandably, I'm interested in talking about that. So watch this space, Deviant listeners.
Yeah.
The way you're teasing this out is, are you saying that you are likely to be at odds ideologically with Mark? I'm just curious, or you
I
won't
very
reveal
much
that?
doubt it.
Okay.
Yeah, I very much doubt it. But I do see it as an opportunity, maybe, for a little bit of shit stirring, at least on my side.
Good.
Absolutely, we encourage that. Yeah,
I'm in this awkward state where I'm currently teaching the Diary of Anne Frank, and I'm teaching it by choice. But my principal, I pushed back a little bit, because he said, this text has become a propaganda piece for the whole Jewish victimhood.
Yeah.
And I empathize with that. But one thing is, I already created the unit. So I kind of needed to, it was hard for me to recreate a unit, and I created the unit a few years ago. And second of all, it's I do find it's quite a powerful text for kids that age. It's, because it's it's a compelling text. It's by a person who's their age. So I wasn't ready to throw it out. But as we read certain excerpts, I find myself less and less ready to teach it again. Let's just put it that way. And that's a tricky one, right? Because as a human being, I think she absolutely deserves our eyes, or our empathy. But it's hard to know to what extent I should care that it's then usurped into something larger.
At this point, don't you teach it to some extent? Or I'm sure this might come up, right? Is Anne Frank? Anne Frank is not just this Jewish girl in wherever it was, Amsterdam or wherever it was. She is also the Palestinian child, surely, right?
That's exactly what I said initially to my.
Ideally, there is she holds a universality
absolutely,
in the sense, right?
100%. That was my initial counter argument to my boss. I was like,
well, that's how you teach it. You've got to problematize it for the students and show them your ambiguity about it, or your ambivalence about it, I should say.
That's tricky, because I don't even want to go into modern day politics at all. It's too sensitive. I've got a couple Jewish students in my class, one of whom is autistic and doesn't understand the nuances at all. He's always just pro Jew, and he's got all his lines ready to talk about the suffering of the Jewish people. So yeah, if they were older, I might, but I have to kind of stay away from all that, you know. So it has to, if that universality is going to exist, it's mostly going to have to come internally from them, you know, and it's going to require a degree of like, reflection that I'm not sure if I'll be able to achieve in this context. But anyway,
since we've thrown in everything but the kitchen sink, I'll just mention that I'm reading this right now. The book of all books. This is
it's a very humble title.
Well, but what do you think it refers to? What book
I'm just
could that
teasing
be?
Anyway, yeah. Well, I assumed it was that book.
It's the Bible, which means book,
okay.
right? But I don't know if you're familiar with Colosso. He wrote The Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony. He wrote
exactly. Yeah, I haven't, you know, when I was reading your book, I haven't read much Colosso, but I am aware of that book and of that, and I might have dipped into it at some point. And I thought, I really want to go back and read that book because I was so interested in, you know, your use of it in pilgrimizing. Would you also recommend the Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony?
Oh, absolutely. It's canonical for me. And Ka, I mean, The Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony is his exploration of Greco-Roman myth and tradition and literature, right? Ka is his engagement with Indian, Hindu, ancient Vedic thought and philosophy and culture. And then, you know, he does the same thing for the tradition of the Torah in the Book of all books. There's some reference towards the end to the New Testament and the Messiah and everything, but it's all based on, you know, Jewish tradition and how Jewish tradition grew out of this Middle Eastern cultural milieu, but differentiated itself from that. And I mean, you know, this is part of an 11 book series. I'm going to read them all eventually, but like the last one was called the Tablet of Destinies, which is about, you know, Mesopotamian culture, which of course Jewish culture grew out of in that Middle Eastern or Near Eastern, you know, cultural matrix. So it's great. Like all of Colosso's stuff that I've read has been fascinating.
Yeah, I haven't really read much of him at all. Have you read any Colosso, Tomek? No.
No, but I just thought about how you are Harmony. Coming back to Israel, and I just remembered your South African connection and South Africa's prominent role in the UN in terms of, you know, charging Israel with war crimes and genocide and so on.
The South Africa now, although of course the South Africa I grew up in was a profound, you know, extreme apologist for Israel and the Afrikaners, you know, and the Voortrekkers. They always, there was this weird thing where a lot of them were anti-Semitic, but they sort of held up, you know, the Jews as a good example for how to essentially set up an apartheid state,
right?
In a way,
I think I remember learning about that as well.
And of course, Israel and Palestine is as close. Well, it is. It's very similar to the apartheid state of my childhood.
Well, Mandela pointed that out at the time. He's like, you know, same things going on over there that's going on here.
Yeah.
Back in the day. You know, Mandela, the guy that Dick Cheney labeled a terrorist.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've gone on long enough. This has been another fascinating conversation. Thanks for joining us, Steve. Everyone, subscribe to the Idiots I Ching on YouTube. I'll include the link in the show notes.
A few more subscribers. I'm working hard here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Embrace your inner 8 and pimp yourself.
Well, the
Shameless
thing is,
self-promotion.
you know, is that I have a lot of 8 in me, and so, you know, in the Enneagram you have a kind of this idea of the trifix, where you've got like a heart component, a head component, and a kind of instinct or body intelligence. And in the Enneagram, I see myself as very much like a 4-5-8. And I actually think of you, Mark. I'm not sure about Tomek. Tomek's an interesting one, but I think of you as an 8-5-4 in a weird way, in the sense that I see your home base as quite 8-ish, but I also see you very 5. And of the 3 heart types, there's a bit of 3 there, so maybe a 4-wing 3, but I don't see you as a 2. I do see you as kind of the individualist sitting there with your hat and interest in deviant literature. That's all very 4 as well. So yeah, lots of crossovers. So I'm looking forward to the 4-5-8, 8-5-4
meeting of the minds. Yeah, me too.
Rap session, essentially. Yeah.
Well, since we're engaging in shameless self-promotion, here's my most transgressive text. Earnest Games.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that the most transgressive?
Well, let me just read some of the titles. A Tale of Two Blowjobs, Alpha Male 2.0.
We should be talking about this. Why don't you choose
adolescent psychedelic reverie, A Message from the National Security State, Assassin, 4 or 5 Ways to Shoot Andy Warhol, The Lady Boy or the Tie Girl, Flanagan's Wank, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 2020.
What is this thing? Is it a series of provocative essays?
Well, let's read the blurb, shall we? Ready, players and haters? Earnest Games, Mark Will's latest literary amusement, is now online. Included in this volume are, and then those are all the texts included, whether read as a random collection of short fictional narratives or an experimental novel with a unified theme, Earnest Games will completely reboot your conception of literature. So what are you waiting for? Insert coin, press play, and let the games begin.
Essentially, Mark Will does Bukowski.
Well, there's something to that, but
you're a much more rarefied and intellectual Bukowski. I think Bukowski what was Bukowski? He's probably a bit of a 7-8, something like that. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Right.
I had some spillage.
Are we
so
calling it quits
doing all
there?
this crazy camera shit
before Chow Mein
self-combusts? Yeah.
Chow Mein disappears. Yeah.
All right, we'll end it here, people. Hope you enjoyed our exploration of this deviant text known as the Ching. And we'll talk to you next time. Farewell.
Thanks, everybody.